Let me pray and we'll jump in. Father God, our discussion, I thank you that we can just gather as men just to encourage each other, to know each other, and to be known by each other. I pray that as we finish this course up in just a couple weeks, that just our minds will be renewed in it, even if it's nothing new, but just being refreshed in that, in the truth, and being able to ultimately lead other men and even women and disciple them and teach them about what it is to work and be a worker. In Christ's name I pray, amen. All right, we're talking redeeming work today, and this is a pretty easy session. It's kind of going to piggyback on the end of our first session, and this kind of at the end there, I gave you some practical stuff. But we're just going to work through some strategies for redeeming work. As a review, we talked about how God created us to work. We are workers because God is a worker. Work is good, and that man was created to correspond to the earth as we came out of the earth was not fruitful, so God created man. Man was not fruitful, God created woman, but our correspondence is to the earth, which makes earth work a very ready, available idol for us to worship. We saw because of the fall, there's a frustration with our work, and there's also an impermanence, and it's an easiness to worship. We saw that last time that we can escape into indolence or exigence, or escape into our work, or escape from our work, right? And so that both are corruptions of work because of the fall. And today we just want to talk about redeeming work and just some strategies, practical things about redeeming work. That your work is energy expended. It is not, as first blank there, energy wasted, right? That it even though it can fall into these things and even though it's corrupted, it's not a wasted thing. And so there is a hope, even though we've talked about the frustration. There's frustration at work, and there's impermanence. But it is a good thing. I read some of you have probably read Collins' Good to Great. That's kind of the standard go-to leadership book of the the last 20 years. But there's a story in there by Vice Admiral James Stockdale, who was president of the Citadel at one point, but he was a POW in Hanoi Hilton. And he was interviewed by a guy afterwards, and all these things talking about how he made it through, and that he got a Medal of Honor for, I think, basically actually self-affliction for pretending that he was this. I mean, you can read his story, but he talked about how he made it through this enduring time, and he says this. He said, "I never lost faith in the end of the story. I never doubted not only that I would get out, but also I would prevail in the end and turn the experience into the defining event of my life, which in retrospect I would not trade." He was asked, who didn't make it out of the Hanoi Hilton? He said, that's easy. It was the optimists. They were the ones who said, we're going to be out by Christmas. Christmas would come, Christmas would go. And then he said, we were going to be out by Easter. Easter would come, Easter would go. And then Thanksgiving, and it would be Christmas again. And they all died of a broken heart. He said, this is a very important lesson. You must never confuse the faith that you will prevail in the end, which you can never afford to lose, with the discipline to confront the most brutal facts of your current reality, wherever they may be. And his idea is, those who are short-sighted, okay, we just got to make it 3 months. They're the ones that failed. The ones that were like, we're going to be here for the long haul, but in the end, we're going to win. That kind of idea. Those are the ones that made it out. He called it a hopeful realism. And that's what work is. If you look at it, it's like, yes, there's an impermanence. Yes, it can be an idol. If it's just these short little, well, if I get this job, I'm going to be happy. I'm going to get this job, I'm going to be happy. And if it's just those, then you're going to crash. But if it's those who say, in the end, whatever happens, I'm going to prevail. I'm going to be in it for the long haul. I'm going to see that God is going to use this in my life. Then those are the ones who succeed. And so we're just going to kind of work through quickly some of these strategies. I mean, there's just ideas, they're just applications, and you can apply them to your context. For those who don't know, my story, I've been in the, quote, full-time ministry now almost 13 years. It'll be 13 years in May. I had a job every year of my life since I was 14. So started at Kids R Us, which was the closed version of Toys R Us back in the day. And then I went to a movie theater, and I was a landscaper, and I worked at a bagel shop in the food court of the mall, and I worked as a janitor at my high school, and then I worked in a steel mill, and so I've done about a ton of things. And then after college, I was a TA at the Citadel for a year and ran their intramurals program, and then I became a school teacher after I got a job, and then I went off to seminary. So I'm not one. We do have a few of these guys on staff. I'm not some of these young guys that have actually gone from college right into the ministry, which is not a bad calling. I actually have some credibility in the work environment world. So I've actually done a job that's not drinking coffee. Not that we just drink coffee, but that's what the perception is anyway. So I understand kind of the frustration of it. I understand kind of thinking, okay, how does this work and how does this valued? I'm setting mobile homes. I'm a PE teacher for an elementary school. I'm coaching baseball for $1,500 a year, or and you know that pain, Hughes, I know. So let's just talk some strategies, and then we'll get into you guys your groups. Number one of the ways we can redeem work is, and it's very simple, but it's a vital thing, is providing for your family. It's just providing for your family. 1 Timothy 5:8, we'll get to it in a few weeks. Those who don't care for their relatives, especially their own household, have denied the faith. Such people are worse than unbelievers. And, I mean, the unsung heroes here, if you think about your dad and your mom, I thought about my dad. My mom didn't work until I went off to college, and she got a little job at the Gap because she was bored. I mean, that's the honest truth. They didn't need the money, but she just was, my brother was off doing his thing, and she had one kid at home, and he was self-sufficient, so she went and worked for a couple hours a week. But the reason I was able to go to college and do baseball growing up and had a truck and all these things is because my dad provided. And then I was able to get a job and then go off to a school, and then they didn't pay for my grad's work, but I mean, I don't even know if I'm going to be able to pay for my kids' undergrads the way he did. But he provided for me in a way that, I'm grateful, and it's a huge blessing to your family, but it's also something that's godly. We're supposed to be doing that, and so we're not giving them everything we need, but giving what they need. And so it's a way that you redeem work, and just remembering I am providing. And again, most of us in this room married, a lot of us kids. If it wasn't a wife and it wasn't kids, you could do anything you wanted, couldn't you? I'm thinking I could go to Boston and I could work at the 7-Eleven for $8 an hour. I could probably make it work if it was just me, but I can't do that because I have this family, and it is a godly thing to provide for your family. Number 2, skillful and excellent work glorifies God. God looked at all he had made, and he saw that it was very good. He does things with excellence. There's something about doing a job well that gives a sense of satisfaction, right? When you finish something and you're like, man, whatever it is, whatever your job, the great sale that you just made, you closed that deal, you built that well, you figured that thing out on the computer that no one else could, you spent hours here, this customer left satisfied, you designed that deal, whatever it is. I plowed that field. There's something when you do it well, it is not only a reflection of God, it is fulfilling in a good way. And we've all been blessed by skillful workers. We've all been frustrated by skillful workers. How many times have you called the plumber and he showed up 2 days late and 4 hours your wife was waiting for him, and then they didn't even do the job and they had to come back, and you're like, what in the world? On the flip side, how many times have you asked somebody's done work for you, you're like, man. And we had last year, one of our members had a guy come over to our church, his landscaper, and he just killed it. I mean, it was like, man, this guy in an hour transformed all these trees that got knocked down from the first hurricane, or maybe it was the second hurricane, I can't remember. But it was one of the hurricanes, and they knocked down all of these Leland cypress that was like our fence. I mean, he came in like an hour, had like this thing looking like it was Mr. Miyagi's backyard. It was awesome. I mean, and so the idea of skill is huge, right? Even the next verse down, and number 3, that a diligent, skillful man in business, he will stand before kings, and that's huge. Number 3, finding work is a way to find God's favor through diligence. When there's obedience, when you're doing what God's called you to do in the workplace, it's a place where he can elevate you and put you in places where you can make him known. And there's a frustration piece. I know when some people are some of you guys work for other people, some of you are the boss, and I get that. Actually, probably there's more bosses in here than there is, guys that are not bosses. But when you're in that place where you're just kind of middle management or lower end of the deal, and you're like, when is it going to be my time? When you are diligent in doing things with excellence, it's a way for God to show his favor through your diligence. And so I remember in the summers when I was teaching, I used to set mobile homes for extra money. My wife had just stopped working as Samuel was born, and so I went out and I worked with this guy at the church, and man, mobile home setting is the worst job in the history. I mean, it is bad news. But it was good money. It was extra money. I needed, the extra money for our family. And so through the summer, I was the tie-down guy, which meant, in case the hurricanes came, which these things would have never held up in a hurricane. I don't even know how but they passed inspection. So, tying these things down so that they don't go blow away. And man, I got good at it. I got fast at it. By the end of the summer, the guy was like, hey man, would you do this for me during your school year? He's like, I'll just leave everything out. You can come out and do it, and I'll pay you X amount of dollars. And it was good enough money. I was like, man, I can't turn that down. So I would wake up twice a week, 5 a.m., go drive to some Yemisi or some place in the middle of the country and set a mobile home, be back by 7:30 in the morning, get showered, and go to work. But I had shown, okay, this guy is reliable, he's trustworthy, I can actually leave this stuff here, it's going to happen. And then next summer, I was back on the crew again, and I was actually running the crew by the end of next summer. And then they asked me, you want to work full-time here? I'm like, no, I did not. I'm going off the seminary. I did not want to do this full-time. But the idea of God's favor through excellence, it's huge, through diligence and God recognizing. And maybe God never has you be the boss, but that there's opportunities sometimes there. And you guys, some of you have worked through that and started here and now you're here. Number 4, work shapes your character. Even the word character comes from the Greek that means to be stamped or engraved. It's a process of work over time. It's a slow process, but it shapes your character. And we've all seen the guy that kind of he went to Harvard and he shows up and he expects he's going to be the boss, and you're like, kid, you don't know nothing, right? And then we've seen the guy who worked his way through Georgia Southern through 6 years, and he worked his way up the ladder. Now he's 49. He's been there 25 years, and he just knows what he's doing, right? He's been shaped by this deal, and it's a process, and work shapes you probably like no other thing. Even in 1 Peter, you are slaves, and the idea of slaves there, even though it's not the same slavery as America, it was there was some wickedness in it, and some of it was just an employer-employee relationship. But he says, if you're a servant, if you're a slave, you must accept the authority of your master with all respect. Do what they tell you, not only if they are kind and reasonable, because that's easy, right? If your boss is a good boss, it's easy to be like, man, I want to work for this guy. But even if they're cruel, for God is pleased with you when you do when you know what is right and patiently endure. So the idea of being able to work for a hard boss, man, that stinks. Show up every day for a guy who doesn't appreciate you. But it's a character-shaping thing. And a lot of guys like to change. Man, they can't handle, this guy's not giving me the props. This guy's not whatever. And they bolt. And sometimes it's fine to leave a job. It's okay to leave a job. It shouldn't be because I'm slack or my skills aren't level or I'm just not happy or I don't like this guy. I mean, if there's moral issues or God's calling, usually when we're counseling people, we don't say it's a wrong or right, or it's more of a left and a right? Unless there's sin involved, and I can't tell you if God wants you to go work for that firm versus that firm. I don't know that answer. So it's a left or right, not wrong or right, unless there's a sin issue or something clear. But there's a way in which God shapes you as a man through work. And I'm glad that my dad said at 14, I need to go out and get a job. I've told my son right now. My son's 17 years old. He hates school. I'll tell you, he's just like his dad. Hates school. So and he gets done at 2:50, and he's not a super athlete, so he doesn't go out and play sports and stuff. So he's got a job. Because I told him you got to get a job. Because he ain't going to sit at home all day and do nothing, so he works till 5:30 every afternoon in a law firm and does the most boring job in the history of man. He photocopies stuff and scans it. But it's money for his car, and he needs to learn to work. And so it starts shaping you young. So when your boys, if you have boys, get to a point where they are starting to ask for money, let me tell you, that is the time to send them out, in my opinion. And I don't know if I'm right. I only have one 17-year-old yet. I'll tell you in 10 years if it worked. But I've seen it done ahead of me by guys, some of our elders, and it worked for them. I would say make them work. 5, integrity is your megaphone for evangelism. It's not that you're supposed to utilize your office as your evangelistic platform, but it does give you a platform. Right? Even the word integrity, it's actually a mathematical term. It comes from that integral number. Remember that? An integer, where there's integer's a whole number, right? And it's easy to add up whole numbers. You say 2 plus 2 plus 3, that equals X, right? But if it's 1/3 plus 7/16 plus 9/32, not quite as easy because it's not whole numbers. There's a mystery with that. You got to find the common denominator and all that stuff. I don't remember how to do. Right, Mark probably remembers how to do all that stuff. But Yeah, that's why God invented the calculator. That's why some hardworking man invented the, or maybe woman at Texas Instruments back in the 70s did the calculator, right? But there should be no mystery in mind for your work. There shouldn't be like, I can't add it up. When people see that guy, they're not shocked he goes to church, right? And we talk about this a lot on Sundays, I know. But it's. Did you see how he treated that customer? Did you see how he handled that invoice? See how much time he spends with his secretary? It makes me uncomfortable. He's married. He's touching her shoulder all the time. You know, he's a little huggy. So there's integrity in the workplace. It adds up because it's a megaphone for evangelism where you lift Jesus up. You're an effective ambassador. 6, you glorify, you redeem work by doing what you were born to do. And not everyone gets to work in their, quote, dream job. If there's no such thing as a dream job. But the idea that when your gifts intersect with your work, it's a beautiful thing. It's a great thing. And it's one of those things where sometimes it's like you don't even feel like, and I know it's a stupid T-shirt and it's not even true. But you know, if you do what you dream of doing, or if you do dream job, then you never go to work a day in your life, whatever the old say is. That's bogus because there ain't no perfect job. Because I used to think, if I could play second base for the Phillies, that'd be the perfect job. But then I go and read about the life of the Major League Baseball player. I'm like, that job sucks. Yeah, the money's good. But, I mean, they're gone 190 days a year. They have like a 3-day break at the All-Star break. And if you're an All-Star, you don't get a break. Your hotels, and quite honestly, I love baseball, but I don't love baseball every day. You get to park at 2 o'clock in the afternoon taking BP. You're there till midnight. If it goes in extra innings or a rain delay, you're just sitting around half your life. Yeah, I know it's good money, but it's not a dream job is the point. There is no dream job. But if you're in a job that, man, you feel like this is where I'm gifted, and I do enjoy it a lot, there's times when you come home and you're like, man, I don't even feel tired. I feel like that was a good day. You know, that was fun. People used to ask, how do you do 3 services on a Sunday? I can't believe you do 3. Like, see, it's not actually bad. I'm fine. Now, 4 services sucked. But that's just because it was Saturday. But 3, because I feel like this is what I was created to do. So I'm not like, I'm so weary. Physically, Monday I'm more tired than I am Sunday afternoon. Because there's energy there, right? And there's excitement there a little bit. And when you're in your sweet spot, man, it could bring some redemptive value. And one of the challenges is some of us are not very aware of what our gifts are. We think we're good at something, and we're not really. And I saw this in seminary all the time. A guy get up and preach a sermon, and he's like, he's the worst thing I've ever seen. I'm like, don't go into the preaching ministry. Go be the administrative pastor or whatever, but don't go preaching because you're awful, even though you think you're good, because your wife probably tells you, that was great, honey, but it really wasn't good. So that's where community comes in. And really, if you want to know if you're good at something, just see, are people being blessed by you? Are people actually being encouraged by you? Are they being built up by what you are doing? And again, the idea that, and we see this a lot, not as much in the generation that's in this room, a lot of the younger generation thinks that they want to go into ministry. The 21-year-old Christian wants to go into full-time ministry. And it may surprise you to tell you that I'm never one that pushes that. I would rather have guys in the workforce at Gulfstream or at whatever downtown, because not that we don't need good guys working at the church, but it's not. First of all, it's hard to see behind the curtain, right? Of the Wizard of Oz guy, you get to see. It's not easy. And kind of 3 traps, real quick. And these are something that taught to me, but just something that I've given to others as they're like, okay. Is number 1, if you want to go into ministry, don't make it because you think it's more important than the secular world, because that's not biblical, right? The kind of idea of vocational guilt. Well, I shouldn't make a lot of money, and I shouldn't do all these things, and the marketplace is less godly. It's false theology. It's wacky, right? Because you guys have opportunities to reach guys that I'll never reach, bottom line. Jeremy can reach musicians a ton better than I can, right? There's folks you guys interact with at the golf club or at the whatever, 1,000 times more. They don't want to hear me, especially since my wife tells me to dress up and I still won't. So they're like, they see me and they're like, I don't want to hang out with them. A second kind of trap is that even though it seems like all we do is sit around and drink coffee, ministry is super frustrating and super painful, bottom line. Think about if you guys having to go to church where you work. All right, so that's never fun. Think about you guys' wives always saying, couldn't you just get another job? couldn't you just get out of the ministry? And if you think that's not the norm, go talk to some of the wives. And never be able to separate those things. It's very difficult. And so third thing is we would say, if you wanted to work in the ministry, what works best is if you go volunteer and serve in a ministry for a long time and see if that's something that's beneficial and edifying. If you start doing it for free, and then sometimes people will call you and say, hey, would you like to do that for non-free? That's the best way. That's what we usually do. See someone that's already doing it. And so it's kind of how we identify deacons and elders. We look for guys that are already shepherding. And so we kind of say, okay, he's already shepherding, so let's go talk to him. This guy's already serving. This gal's already serving. Let's go talk to them about being more kind of in as an official person in that role, as that deacon role or whatever. Doesn't mean they're going to be guaranteed, but that's how we identify it. Number 7, make money so you can be generous. It's pretty obvious. That, there's certain ones of us are going to be able to be more generous. I have been the recipient on several people in this room, men in this room, just generosity at different times in my life, on multiple levels, that have blessed me, and that's what we do. We bless others because God's blessed us. Number 8, take Jesus to work, and that's not some cheesy Baptist thing. The idea, though, is that we separate as men. We go, here's my quiet time. Now I got to work. Here's my, and the idea is Jesus wants to move into your work, and he wants to be there with excellence. Even in this illustration I heard, and I put it in here. So this verse, Jesus made a whip, some ropes, and chased them out of the temple. And we know that illustration. And this guy who was teaching this session was a businessman, and he said I had to fire people all the time. And he's like, he struggled with that as a Christian. But then he came to this passage and he thought, he's trying to learn about leadership and work from the life of Jesus, and there's obviously so many things you can observe and watch. But one of the things that stuck out to him is when he actually, the literal rendering is he fashioned a whip, and it's the idea it took some time, and so Jesus is thinking through what he's about to do before he goes and, in essence, fires a bunch of people in his language. And it's the idea of just taking Christ with you in his diligence, and when you go into the office and, okay, there's this quick, I know you have a business meeting, it's just that Nehemiah, Lord, just give me the words to say in this and give me wisdom in this, and help me to be gentle if I do have to fire. And it's not just because I'm angry, it's actually because there's a reason, and it's well thought of, and Jesus had a reason for driving them out because they were turning this place into a business and not a worship center, and all these things. But we as men, one of the most important things we can do is when you head off in a few minutes, Christ is with you. You're inviting him in. I mean, he's with you regardless, but that you're like, all right, help me with excellence. Remind me that this, and just guide me through this. It's a huge way to redeem work. Transferring skills between work and ministry. And so many of y'all do this already so well, but it's a way to redeem work. Right, you're a gifted communicator, so you're this. And I could go around the room and talk about, Mark's administrative skills and how he's moved in and taken those engineering things and help with the church. I can talk about how Charlie has taken his wisdom and finances and in that world and built them into this body here, right? And how he's taught people, he's counseled people. I go through the room and do it. Evan has done most of the, design of like rooms and stuff out there and here for the, Bo's great with boys, and so Bo works with our kids' ministry, even though his boys are grown. I can go through the list all the way down, right? You got music gifts, some of y'all in this room, and you're using them out there, but you're also using them. So that's the idea, is that you transfer, you're good here, but you're good there, and that's what we do. God made you, wired you up here. There's one guy that's not here today that he's moving. He's a young guy, always doesn't have a beard anymore. He shaved it. His name, I think it's Jonathan. Is that his name, Jonathan? Huh? Yeah. So he's moving in a couple weeks. He used to be no. That's not Longbeard. That's there's a guy named Longbeard. It's that's a different guy. No, it's the guy. He's usually down here. He's real young looking. He works for the California Angels or Anaheim Angels. He's the website. So he's been doing all the He does their website. Yeah, he does. There's something with them. He's moving to Atlanta because. Yeah, that's right. He does Moneyball. That's what he does. He's moving to Atlanta, but he's been doing all our coding for our new website that's hopefully going to launch soon. So, well, we had a practice run through it, all the staff, and we were trying to find stuff, and like half the staff couldn't find stuff. We're like, okay, we need to rework that. So, but the design is there. It's all good. It looks beautiful. Sophie has done a great job. So, anyway, but point being, it's the both and, right? It's an opportunity to use build the body in different ways, but also the skills that God has shaped you with at work. And so don't miss those opportunities. And for the guys that are, and again, it's not these guys in this room mostly, but it's if you're like, oh, that when I have X, my kids get out of the house, I'll have more time, I can do that. You'll never have more time. I mean, I've seen everybody in every season of life, and no one ever has more time. I can tell you, when you're single, you have time. That's the only time you have time, when you're single. Everything else, you don't have time. And number 10, don't miss the Shechem moments. And I was going to read Joshua 24, 1-13. I don't have the time to do it because we start a little late. But if you read that passage, Israel is complaining and they're mad at God because there's this and it's that. And he just goes through literally, and he drops a hammer on them. And for 13 verses, he just says, I did this. I did this. I did this. I did this. I mean, literally, he reminds them from Abraham up till where they are every time. Not even every time, just some high points. I did this, 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 I did this. Walks them through it, right? And the idea of don't miss the Shechem moments is don't miss the moments where God shows up and does stuff that you're like, wow. Whether it's a business that's this horrible deal and you don't know how to handle it and you got to move in, you're the accountant and boom, it's a mess. Whether it's just God showed up and you got this great sale and you're like, what? How is that even possible? Don't miss opportunities to be like, this is God doing this. And I've had, obviously in my line of work, quote, I've seen a lot of these things that I'm grateful for. In the midst of chaos, in the midst of brokenness, I see God's Spirit moving. It's so encouraging. Even when we first got this building, that was a huge Shechem moment in 2009, which now it's just like, everybody and their mother uses it and it's just kind of thrown around, which is great. I mean, that's what it's for. But when we got this back in 2009, man, this thing was like, man, we got a building. That's awesome. We don't have to set up anymore. It's a huge moment for us as a church. Huge moment. And you go back to those and you remember those. But those only happen when you invite God into your work. So don't miss them. Don't miss thanking God for them. The promotion, the well done by the boss, him coming through and rescuing you. God wants us as men. He cares about our work. He just does. It's part of how he's made us. He wants you to bring him into it, and there's redemption in there. And just, final thing, it's not another thing, but you are his rep. You represent him at the workplace and his church. And the quote by Dorothy Sayers there, the church in our time has forgotten the secular vocation is sacred, forgotten that a building must be a good architecture before it can be a good church, that a painting must be well painted before it can be a good picture, that work must be good before it can call itself God's work. And that's the idea. There's a great quote I read, story about Joe DiMaggio, one of the greatest of all time. There you go, the Yankees fan. There you go. Get your Yankees hat on there, Jeter. I know. That he was in the middle of his kind of prime, but it was the end of the season. Yankees already clinched, just waiting for the playoffs, and DiMaggio's up and he hits a shot in the gap, and everyone else in the Yankees is just kind of ready for the playoffs, and nobody's doing anything. It doesn't matter. And DiMaggio, man, he hustles. He busts it around first base. He sees that he's got a chance, and he goes into second, dives. Gets a double. Just goes all out like it's a World Series. And after the game, he's asked, why do you do that? The game is over. I mean, the season's over. Why risk getting hurt? Why whatever? And he says two things you got to understand. I wear the pinstripes, and that means something. Right? He's a New York Yankee, which he always said, thank God for being a Yankee, right? That was his famous quote. But the second thing he said was, there's always some kid in the stands who may be seeing me for the first or last time, and I owe him my best. It's just this idea that he's always given his best, no matter what, beginning of the season, end of the season. He wears the pinstripes, he represents something, and he owes it to, and that's the idea. We don't owe God because we can't pay back God back, but we do represent him, and we do want to give him our best wherever we go. So let me pray. You guys go in groups. Father, guide our groups and our discussions. Thank you for making clear what we have been called to do, and thank you for letting us work and actually giving value to it and making it redemptive. In Jesus' name, amen.